Hello, everyone. It is GleeCon, and I'm here once more with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. And as always, I thank you for watching and tuning in. On the last episode, we wrapped up our completionist run of Ungura Crater with Horde. We had already done so with Alliance for Classic in that walkthrough series. On this episode, we're going to continue our read through of Warcraft Durotan. The last episode was chapter 25, where the Frostwolf clan pushed into the great north to find the seat of the elements. The elements are crying out for aid. The spirits, the seat of the spirits. And when they got closer, the soil was on fire, and they couldn't bring the whole clan, or they didn't want to, so just Durotan and a select few went with him to a glacier where the seat was. And when they made it to the seat, all of a sudden, out of the mounds of snow everywhere, red walkers burst up to attack, and that's where we left off. So stay a while and listen as we do chapter 25 of Warcraft Durotan. For a precious and irrecoverable heartbeat, the Frostwolves were so stunned they did not move. It cost them dearly. Delgar was the closest target, and he had barely lifted his axe when a hammer smashed into his skull. Durotan's focus was heightened, and he saw every detail. The shape of the hammer's head, the mottled colors of black and red on the Red Walker's hand, how the chunk of stone descended, and the look of shock on Delgar's face before that face was obliterated. The snow had masked their scent, but now that the Red Walkers had revealed themselves, their stench assaulted Durotan's nostrils like an enemy itself. He choked on the smell, coughing and turning to position Drekthar behind him. He heard the shaman calling out to the spirits for aid, but there was no time to squander waiting to see if the ailing spirits would help them now. Delgar had already lost his life. His blood was pumping out on the snow, turning it into a puddle of steaming black-red fluid. On instinct, Durotan raised Sever just in time to stop a crashing blow. He let his legs bend slightly, allowing the Red Walker's momentum to carry him a step too far. Stepping away, Durotan used the full force of his turning body, sever an extension of his massive, powerful arms, as he sliced almost entirely through the Red Walker. Fresh blood poured from the wound, spilling over the dried crust of a victim's blood as the Red Walker stumbled. His hammer fell from his limp hands, and his eyes glazed over. He was dead when he hit the snow. Gia had brought a spear, and despite her age was whirling as deftly as she danced beside the midsummer bonfire. The length kept her foe's mace away from her, and her smaller frame enabled her to move more swiftly than he could. The Red Walker lunged, trying to smash her weapon as if it were a twig, but before the massive club could shatter the spear, Gia's weapon had found its mark in his throat. He gurgled, and his body spasmed as Gia yanked the weapon free and turned back to the fray. Drekthar was still chanting. One of the Red Walkers spotted him and snarled. The gesture cracked the old blood on her face, and small flakes of gore fluttered to the snow. She and two other Red Walkers headed straight for Drekthar. "Drekthar!" Durotan shouted, but the shaman ignored him. He stood as if rooted to the earth, his blind face turned toward his enemies. Then, as Durotan watched, fully expecting to see this orc whom he revered above all others cut down before his horrified gaze, Drekthar lifted his staff, uttered a string of words Durotan didn't understand, and brought the staff down. With a groan that sounded like it issued from a living throat, a zigzag crack appeared in the snow. It grew wider and wider, opening like a hungry mouth, and the three Red Walkers toppled into it. Their screams echoed for a long time before they were silenced. Durotan caught Zarka's and Kulzak's eyes. With one mind, the three of them went after the two remaining Red Walkers, hacking and screaming at them, driving them back until they too toppled into the fissure. "Durotan!" It was Gia's voice from inside the entrance to the seat of the spirits. "There are more in here. Hurry!" Durotan threw Drekthar an agonized glance. "Drekthar, the fissure is an arm's length in front of you. I cannot find a way to cross."
"Kill our enemies. I will be all right out here,"
Drekthar called back, and after seeing the very earth crack open in response to the shaman's plea, Durotan believed him.
"We will return for you,"
he promised, and raced after Kulzak and Zarka into the cavern. It was heart-stoppingly exquisite, even more so than the first glimpse he had promised, but Durotan could spare no thought for beauty. He was focused on the ugliness, the obscenity of the presence of red walkers in this hallowed place. He permitted bloodlust born of righteous fury to fill him to guide his hand as he bore down upon them. He felt blood spatter his face, tasted it in his mouth. His arms seemed to only grow stronger as he swung, parried, struck, severed. He heard the sound of battle all around him, the cries of triumph, the death rattle in the throat, the crack of breaking bones and skulls, and the spurt of blood and slither of entrails. At last it was done. Durotan whirled, seeking out new enemies, but they all lay, stiffening, on the icy floor. Panting, he lowered his arms, only now aware that they quivered with exhaustion. Everything was still, so still, in the cavern. He looked for his comrades. Gia looked drained, but as her eyes met his, she smiled. Kolzak stood nearby, also taking stock of the situation. Just as Durotan had turned to hasten to Drekthar, the old shaman entered, escorted by Zarka.
How?
Began Durotan.
The fissure closed when it was no longer needed,
Said Drekthar simply, as if such a thing were not astounding. And again, this was the seat of the spirits. The wonder of the place struck him all over again. He thought of the tale of that long-ago chieftain's visit. The exploits of the clan's hero had been the focus, and the spirits themselves portrayed as giving in to the stubborn Frostwolf's will. Durotan now understood that if that chieftain had been kept waiting for 3 days and 3 nights, it would have been an easy thing with so much beauty to feed the senses. The cavern they were in was only the beginning. Another entrance at the back of the ice chamber told them where they needed to go, and Durotan once again felt himself called to wander down its softly radiant passages. He could see now that the illumination came not as he had first assumed from the stones embedded in the soil, but from the lichen that grew on their surfaces. So much ice gave much reflection, so that each eerily glowing patch lit up a wide area. And then Durotan felt pain replace the wonder. The Red Walkers and the Frostwolves had shown the ultimate disrespect to the spirits by shedding blood here. How could this have happened? He asked aloud, pained even more than her son.
It looks as though they have lived here for a while,
Kolzak said, shoving a corpse with the toe end of his boot.
They came when the spirits were at their weakest,
Durotan said. As he spoke, he felt the outrage gather again in his chest, like some physical thing that sat there, hunched and smoldering.
The spirits could not defend themselves. Drekthar, do you think this was why they called for help?
Could it have been this simple, yet this brutal? Had the Frostwolves been needed only to remove the ugly stain that was the Red Walkers from this sacred place?
I do not know,
Drekthar said, frowning.
They still clamor for us.
He cocked his head.
For me, and for Gia.
Durotan understood. He could not say he wasn't disappointed, but he accepted that the spirits would need to speak more with their shaman rather than a clan leader. Perhaps this was a rebuke as well, for defiling their seat with bloodshed.
Go. We will stay here and do what we can to purify this outer sanctum.
Gia slipped her arm through Drekthar's and led him away, moving slowly so as not to slip on the ice-slicked earth. Durotan watched them go, envious, but he had another task, hopefully one as pleasing to the spirits. He, Zarka, and Kolzak turned back and looked at the carcasses. Durotan looked down, his lip curling in disgust, as the filthy, blood-covered bodies of the Red Walkers.
We have always burned our honored dead who fell in battle. When we could no longer do so, we mindfully gathered stones to cover their bodies. This is how we show respect. These things do not deserve such treatment. We will feed them to the water's creatures, he said. He could think of nothing more offensive to an orc than to slowly bloat and decay in the water while being nibbled upon by small fish. Ha! Fitting,
Kolzak said, nodding approvingly.
What about Delgar?
Durotan grew somber.
He fell outside, his blood pouring onto the snow. It is in the snow that we will bury him. Let us remove these foul things from the seat of the spirits.
At once, Kolzak readily agreed. He reached out and grasped the legs of one of the Red Walkers, preparing to drag it out, but Durotan stopped him.
No,
he said, wishing he could say otherwise, but having no choice.
We must carry them out. Their blood must not be allowed to further desecrate this place.
The other two looked as unhappy as he felt, but did not argue. Durotan grimaced as he lifted a body in his arms, bringing the dead flesh within inches of his nose, and feeling the blood smear his leather armor. It was vile. They were vile, and he was pleased to give them so dishonorable a resting place. He hoped the spirits would approve. They moved all the bodies outside and then one by one heaved them into the icy depths. The corpses were wearing mismatched armor, no doubt scavenged from the Draenei and orcs they had first butchered and then consumed. Durotan could not help but shudder at the image as he watched the hideous bodies thus weighted down, sink without a trace. No one had suggested taking the armor for themselves. A Frostwolf would prefer death to wearing the armor of a Red Walker. These monsters had met a more honorable end than their dishonorable lives had deserved. Durotan nodded, satisfied. Disposing of the carcasses had been the easy part. Now, he, Zarka, and Kolzak turned their hands toward the task of purifying the area. They began with the outside area first. They scooped up the blood-touched snow and earth, using items they found inside, such as baskets and other containers, and emptied it all into the accepting waters. After this was done, they covered their fallen comrade with clean snow. Here, near the spirits, Delgar would rest, his grave an oblong mound of pure white. Solemnly, the three moved into a large, ice-embraced chamber into which the violence had spilled. Durotan took a moment to look around, trying to determine how best to proceed. He frowned. Something was not right here. For a moment he was tempted to brush away the feeling. Of course something was not right. The sanctity of this place had been violated. But it wasn't that. It was something else. The Red Walkers had been hiding here, perhaps because they were feeding, in a way, on the spirit's energies. The camp was somewhat more orderly than he would have expected from these crazed creatures. It looked, truth be told, like an ordinary orcish encampment. There were sleeping furs, clothing, weapons. Many weapons. Many sleeping furs. Too many. And suddenly, with all the visceral impact of a blow to the gut, Durotan realized what the Red Walker's true plan had been. What a cliffhanger. I don't know what it has been. I'm torn. I don't know. I truly don't know. Maybe they want to destroy this place. Maybe they were planning to use it as the seat of their power, but they've slowly dwindled away. Or even, probably worst of all, I suspect, maybe the bulk of them have left and are now kind of opposite. They cross each other somehow, and they are off to attack the Frostwolf clan. We're going to find out. We only have 5 chapters to go. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching, listening, and tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this reading of Warcraft Durotan. If you did, like, subscribe, and continue to join me in the future. You probably already have. We're 25 chapters into a book. You've probably already made that decision by now. And, hey, guys, I'll catch you all on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft, because this one's in the pipe 5x5.